The sky was bruised purple as the last rays of sunlight bled across the edge of my farm. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the whispering of the wind through the corn stalks. But something was off. Every day, without fail, her SUV appeared, black, shiny, intruding. She didn't ask, she didn't knock. Just parked, as if the land had no owner, as if I didn't exist. The audacity of it sank like a stone in my gut, heavier each time I saw those tires press into the soil I'd nurtured for decades. It wasn't just about property. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. About the simple dignity of a person claiming their own space. And yet, every glance from the driver's side mirror, hers, was a silent challenge. A reminder that she believed rules didn't apply here. A shadow of entitlement, thick and suffocating, draped across my fields. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing sunrise, the tension grew. I watched her from the window, pretending not to notice, but every creak of her door echoed in my chest. Every engine rev made my hands clench. The farm, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield. I imagined confrontations, legal fights, polite warnings that would fall on deaf ears. But deep down, I knew polite wouldn't work. Not with her. Late one night, as the moon carved silver scars across the earth, I walked the perimeter, the damp soil cold under my boots. The SUV was gone, finally, or perhaps temporarily, but the feeling of violation lingered, an invisible mark on my land, my life. I could almost hear her laughter carried by the wind, mocking my helplessness. It was then that the seed of an idea took root, dark and daring, twisted with ingenuity. What if I didn't confront her with words, with law, with anger, but with action? Action, calculated and theatrical. A response that matched the audacity of her intrusion. My mind began to race, schematics, measurements, calculations spinning like storm clouds above my fields. The night hummed, not with insects, but with possibilities. With the promise of turning frustration into spectacle, violation into justice, entitlement into astonishment. I knew the line between absurdity and genius is razor thin. But sometimes, when someone repeatedly trespasses, when boundaries are ignored and disrespect becomes daily routine, ordinary measures aren't enough. Sometimes, you have to build a solution so enormous, so shocking, that it etches itself into memory forever. And that was the night I decided. The night I would not let this continue. The night I would take what was mine, and escalate it to a level she would never forget. Hit subscribe, watch till the end. The farm was more than land, it was a legacy. Generations of sweat, toil, and love had shaped every furrowed row, every gnarled tree, every stone-laden path that cut through the fields. To an outsider, it might have seemed ordinary, but to me, it was everything. The pulse of my family's history, the measure of my patience, the canvas of my pride. Each morning, I walked the dirt paths barefoot, feeling the warmth of the soil, smelling the faint tang of hay and earth. It grounded me. It reminded me who I was. Yet, in the past few weeks, that sanctuary had become a theater of intrusion. The first time I saw her SUV, gleaming black under the midday sun, I froze. At first, I thought it was a visitor, a neighbor, a delivery, but the driver didn't move. She didn't ask. She didn't even glance toward the farmhouse. She just parked right there on my freshly plowed field, leaving tire tracks that gouged the soil like scars. It was audacious, bold, and utterly disrespectful. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe she was lost. Maybe it was a mistake. But the pattern grew, undeniable and infuriating. Every day, like clockwork, the same SUV appeared, in the same spot, mocking the boundaries that I had spent a lifetime respecting. There was something in the way she moved, in the ease with which she trespassed, that stung more than the damage to the land. It was entitlement made human. My mornings became rituals of vigilance. Coffee in hand, I would pace the edge of the property, scanning for the telltale glint of her SUV's chrome, the shadow of its tires across my fields. I observed every detail, the way she parked just so, the slight tilt of the rearview mirror, the scent of exhaust mingling with the early dew. Every intrusion became a dagger to my patience, every ignored boundary a test of my resolve. As the days blurred into one another, frustration simmered beneath the surface. The farm, once a haven of peace, became a stage for my anger and helplessness. I imagined confronting her, imagining the words that could chastise, reprimand, assert dominance, but I knew they would be powerless. She thrived on audacity. Politeness would crumble like dry soil beneath her tires. Logic would fail against someone who believed the rules didn't apply to them. And so my mind began to wander into darker territories. I studied the land, the structures, the mechanics of it all, seeing not just a farm but a potential stage for retribution. I measured distances, angles, and weights in my mind, turning the mundane into schematics. The barn became more than a storage space. It became a workshop of possibility. The fields, the target of trespass, became a canvas for an extraordinary solution. Every night, sleep eluded me. The farm hummed with possibility. The rustling corn, the sighing wind through the trees, the distant hoot of an owl, all seemed to conspire with me, pushing the ideas further, shaping them into something audacious, something unforgettable. I envisioned a plan that balanced precariously between genius and absurdity, daring and theatricality. Something that would leave her stunned, humbled, and finally aware that boundaries were not suggestions, they were law. It was in those long, silent hours that I realized the stakes were no longer just about soil or tire tracks. They were about respect, about asserting one's dignity, about transforming indignation into action. The farm demanded it, my patience demanded it, and ultimately, I knew I had to answer in a way that spoke louder than words ever could. The tension was palpable now, electric, crawling through the earth like a living current. Each morning I woke with a singular thought: today could be the day. Today I would turn the violation into a spectacle, and the audacity into a lesson. The SUV would not merely leave the field, it would leave a story behind, a story told in arcs, flight, and the satisfying justice of meticulous planning. In the shadows of my barn, I started gathering materials: wood, ropes, pulleys, levers. Each piece of the farm became a building block for something that would eclipse mere confrontation. It was not about anger alone. It was about precision, about creativity, about reclaiming control in a world that sometimes seemed to reward brazen entitlement. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, staining the sky a fiery orange, I could feel it. The plan was taking shape. The farm was no longer just land. It was a stage. And she, the uninvited guest, would become the unwilling protagonist of a story she never saw coming. Days slipped by, each one heavier than the last. Every morning, the same intrusion greeted me, the gleaming black SUV, planted in my field like a monument to entitlement. The audacity gnawed at me, a slow burn that no cup of coffee or long walk could soothe. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a challenge, a silent assertion that my boundaries meant nothing, that my land, my history, my effort were invisible to those who believed they were above the rules. I watched her movements with a quiet fury. The way she lingered inside, the subtle hum of the engine, the careless way she stepped over the soil as if it were pavement. Each detail etched itself into my memory. Every day, I traced the tire tracks, noting the exact width, the depth, the angle. I measured distances from tree to tree, from barn to SUV, calculating possibilities. My mind became a blueprint, my farm a canvas of strategy. Sleep became a stranger. Nights were filled with schematics, plans, potential trajectories. I imagined devices, levers, ropes, and tension, turning frustration into invention. The barn transformed into a workshop, each nail and board considered for its role in a grander scheme. What started as mere irritation evolved into a careful obsession. The audacity of her intrusion demanded an equally audacious response. Neighbors whispered about the strange lights flickering behind the barn, the low hums of machines working late into the night. Some thought it was just eccentricity, a solitary farmer with too much imagination. They didn't know the stakes. They couldn't see the violation etched into every furrow of soil, the sense of helplessness that had taken root. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The farm itself bore witness, each row, each stone a silent testament to the intrusion. Then came the subtle provocations. The SUV, left longer than usual, tires pressing into the heart of my harvest. A misplaced fence post? Perhaps, or perhaps deliberate. Every day, her indifference screamed louder than any words ever could. I felt it in my bones. If I did nothing, if I continued to endure, the violation would never end. I began testing small mechanisms, levers and counterweights, curious experiments in physics and ingenuity. Each success, each minor movement of weight and force, fueled a growing confidence. The idea that had first taken root in frustration now solidified into a plan. A solution that was as daring as it was precise. The farm, my body of work, would finally reclaim itself. With every passing day, anticipation built like a storm on the horizon. I imagined the arc of her SUV, the perfect launch, the exact moment when disbelief would register on her face. I visualized the sequence in cinematic detail, the tension of ropes, the pivoting of massive beams, the precise release that would transform trespass into spectacle. My calculations were meticulous. Failure was unacceptable. Even as I worked, I kept watch. The SUV, like a dark sentinel, loomed in the distance. Each day, she grew bolder, parking closer to the barn, testing boundaries as though challenging me to act. And I would act. Not with anger alone, not with words, but with deliberate, calculated brilliance. Night after night, the farm vibrated with quiet energy. The wind carried whispers of motion, boards creaking, ropes straining, levers shifting. Shadows danced under the moonlight, turning ordinary machinery into instruments of potential chaos. The land, my sanctuary, had become a stage, and she, the uninvited guest, the unwitting star. Finally, the day approached. The calculations were complete. Every beam, every pulley, every weight was positioned with precision. The tension in the ropes mirrored the tension in my chest. This was no longer theory, no longer imagination. It was imminent reality. The SUV would move, not by her choice, not by her arrogance, but by the orchestrated force of meticulous design and human ingenuity. As dawn broke, the morning light painted the farm in gold, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. The air was thick, electric with expectation. I checked every mechanism one last time, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The moment had come to transform frustration into action, violation into spectacle, entitlement into astonishment. Every second counted. Every detail mattered. The SUV remained in its usual spot, oblivious, untouching, unknowing. I exhaled slowly, aligning myself with the plan I had crafted in sweat and calculation. This was the culmination of weeks of observation, tension, and ingenuity. And now, the boundary between patience and action was gone. There was no turning back. The farm had spoken, my resolve had hardened, and the stage was set for a response that she would never forget. The audacity of her trespass would meet the audacity of my ingenuity, and nothing would remain the same. The morning air was electric, thick with tension. The SUV sat smugly in the field, unaware that the balance of power was about to shift. I took my position, every muscle taut, every breath measured. One final check, ropes aligned, beams locked, counterweights primed. The farm was silent, holding its breath with me. Then, with a deliberate pull, the mechanism engaged. A low groan of timber, a sudden shift of weight, and the tension snapped. The SUV lurched, then soared, arching through the morning sky like a dark comet against the golden light. Tires spun wildly, metal glinting as it flew, suspended in a moment of disbelief. The ground trembled with its departure, dust and soil erupting where it had been parked for weeks. Time seemed to stretch as the SUV landed far beyond the field, perfectly intact yet completely humbled. Silence returned, heavier than before, broken only by the whispering wind through the shaken earth. The statement was made. Boundaries had been enforced. Respect demanded, not with words, but with a spectacle so audacious, so precise, that it left no room for argument. The audacity of entitlement had collided with the audacity of ingenuity, and the farm had spoken. The field was empty now, the SUV gone, and with it, the weight of repeated intrusion. The soil bore the marks of audacity, both hers and mine, but the balance had shifted. The farm, my sanctuary, had reclaimed its dignity. Each row of crops, each stone, each tree seemed to stand taller, as if acknowledging the restoration of order. I walked the perimeter slowly, taking in the stillness, the quiet triumph that pulsed through the air. There was no celebration, no gloating, just the satisfaction of boundaries respected and patience transformed into action. The audacity of disrespect had met the audacity of ingenuity, and the lesson was carved into memory, not merely conveyed through words. It was more than a single act. It was a statement about ownership, respect, and the lengths one must go to protect what is theirs. Sometimes, justice isn't polite. Sometimes, it demands creativity, courage, and precision. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery hues, I realized the farm had become more than land. It was a stage, a testament, a reminder that boundaries are not optional, and that audacity unchecked invites consequence. The story of that SUV, and the lesson it carried, would linger long after the dust settled.